For the next generation, joining Alison, Noël Pinnock, Chief of the Houston Bureau of Youth and Adolescent Health, and Elvin Quioto, a rising sophomore at Prairie View A&M University.
Let me do a little housekeeping here. So Noël, when you go into work every day,
yes.
What is your mandate? When you think about what you have to do every day, what is it?
What's my mandate on life? Well, let me tell you. I'm going to give you the short and long one. I exist to establish and make suitable provisions for the support and maintenance of an efficient cradle-to-career system to build complete communities that are essential to the preservation of liberties and the rights of all people. That's the long one. Here's the short one. Change lives in a positive way.
What is the biggest obstacle to that? Because I don't think there's anyone who would disagree with that as a daily mandate.
Let me just say this. I mean, there are tons of obstacles. Obviously, there are obstacles that are intrinsic and extrinsic to all of us. I think the motivating factor for me is that we can make a difference in the lives of the most vulnerable in our city, that can impact community, that can change the trajectory of families. I think that is incumbent upon us to know that though the mountain might seem insurmountable, that there are people, there are places, there are things that can coalesce and galvanize around things that matter, that help us to overcome those obstacles. So I look at the mountain in front of me almost upside down as a platform to get me to the next level. And it's not all just optimistic, because there's always the sentiment that, you know, we do have challenges, and I'm not discarding that. I'm not discarding that notion. However, I'm saying that the collective effort of everyone can overcome the challenges and obstacles that beset us.
You just finished your freshman year.
Yes.
How'd it go?
Freshman year was an experience. It was way different from high school. I've learned a lot of things, but one important thing that I learned about freshman year is that you have to watch who you hang around with, because not everyone has good intentions with you. So if you watch who you hang around with and put yourself around positive people, everything is gonna go not perfect, but a little bit easier.
Tell me how you know Noël. Explain to folks how you know him.
The way I know Mr. Noël, the great Noël.
Oh, don't do it.
I went to Worthing High School. I grew up in Sunnyside. I went to Worthing High School, and they had this program called the PACE program. And with that, they brought the people from our class, which was the 2017 class with the highest GPAs, to be interns in the city of Houston. So we were interns for a whole year, and every 3 months they would switch us around. And the way I met Mr. Noël was through PACE, and that was my second internship, and it was the best one so far. That was #1. It was the best one ever.
So you mentioned you're from Sunnyside. You grew up in Sunnyside as well.
Yes, I did grow up in
Historically black
Sunnyside.
community for the people who are watching on the internet and don't know the neighborhoods. I talked about statistics earlier, how you can kind of drown in them. So I try to always find one that sort of gets at the center of the conversation.
Right.
In Sunnyside, residents have a 1 in 11 chance of being a victim of crime each year.
Right.
Talk about the people who live there and who are victims as well. Elvin, why is that? And what do you think the impact of that is on folks in your age group?
That's a great question. I remember I had moved into Sunnyside, and my first week there, I rode my bike to the gas station. I just wanted some ice cream. I came back out, my bike was not there no more. So, a person came up, oh, such and such stole your bike. So I rode with a bike. I walked back home. It was a crazy story. But I feel like it's mostly, the reason for that is mostly the kids. We, as young people, I'm not gonna say we don't have guidance or a path, but we don't have any structure and no one to really tell us what to do. So it's mostly the higher kids. For example, we just finished high school and we don't have anything else to do, those type of kids. You have the kids that don't have the jobs, that don't go to school, and they don't go to the military. So what do? They stay at home. You get bored at home, you start going out and getting into trouble. So I feel like that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of crime in Sunnyside.
From when you lived in Sunnyside to Elvin's time, what's changed the most? What have you seen that really applies to what we're talking about today, race and justice?
You know, Sunnyside at one point was very vibrant. In fact, it was its own municipality before it was annexed by the city of Houston. So when I made it to Houston back in the 80s, and most people say, why did you come? I said, I had no choice. My mom and mom made us come, right? The community was very similar in nature. I mean, we had kids who rode bikes, and normally our bikes were, you know, safe when we left them outside. But ultimately, there was still this sentiment of lack in the community, because it's almost like you suck the oxygen out of a room and then there's no room for you to breathe. And so past the vibrance of Sunnyside and kind of into the terms when I became more of a young teen and growing up as a high school student, I was robbed at the age of 12, walking home from the bus stop at the corner of Ferdinand and Belfort. And the gentleman who robbed me saw that I had 2 briefcases, and I thought maybe he assumed that I was coming from work, because I always patterned my life after Michael Keaton off of Family Ties. And for those who know Michael Keaton, now I love Mike, you know. So I had a briefcase for my books, and I had a briefcase for my trumpet, which I really hated because it came from a garage shop. But in either case, he stuck a gun to my throat and said, "Give me your wallet." And so I looked down at the gun and I said, "Man, you could have came with a cleaner gun, and it's rusty, man. But by the way, I have $2 in my pocket, so take it." He took it. I went home alive. So the reality is victimization is real in mostly any and every community in the city of Houston, but there are high incidences where you see that because of the economics and the social ecological systems of that community drives you to a point where you feel like, you know, I have to take rather than make. My dad, being an immigrant from Jamaica, came to this country with the notion that I don't want to take anything, I want to make everything. And mostly Jamaicans do have 15 jobs, as he did, and it was indicative because he had 15 jobs. And, you know, when you come and live in a society like that, you want to make certain that you will provide the necessary protective factors that are enabling the community to really, if they don't have boots to pull up, to go get them. And if you got to make them, make them.
We've talked a lot today. If you've been here since the beginning, I mean, I think the main underpinnings of this, one of the main underpinnings is this idea of intersectionality, that you can't talk about race and justice without talking about education, without talking about housing, without talking about job opportunities and prospects. So I guess my question is, what is it about Houston that those things, those other things that we've all talked about, aren't being watered and fed? Why are we having to talk about the end result?
That's a good question. You know, I've oftentimes said that comfort enters your home as a guest, remains as your host, and becomes your master. And when asked, they've said, what do you think is the biggest cultural deficiency in our community? I say it's the culture of comfort. It's a silent bigotry and low expectations. You know, when I was growing up in Sunnyside, I can remember all of my teachers. And I had a great mom. My mom and my dad were awesome. I have 4 brothers. I'm of a twin. And one of the things that they did, even in the home, and it's about maybe 1,200 square feet, maybe less than that, because my dad, being who he was, built onto the house, embedded in us the desire to want to do more. And, you know, we can live a few days without food, water, and shelter. And I heard someone talk about the Maslow's needs hierarchy. We cannot live one moment without hope. And so when you suck hope out of a community by not providing the equity in terms of those resources, then you're going to have the inequities in justice. You're going to have the inequities in terms of law enforcement and the criminal system. But it's all about interaction, and it's all about relationships. What we find in the city of Houston is we're not program poor. I mean, we got a lot of people with great ideas. Everybody want to file that 501c and submit that Form 990 to be a bona fide nonprofit. What we find in the city of Houston is that we're system poor. Program rich, but system poor. And so in ordinary terms, most people find that it's very difficult to work together. So what we do with My Brother's Keeper in the city of Houston, by way where we met Mr. Elvin Quioto, by the way, is Honduras, an Honduran. Most people don't know he speaks full Spanish. Is to really bring people together and galvanize them around very specific points that we know are going to help assert the conversation into a new direction and provide and marshal resources that can address them. I can't tell you I didn't have great teachers. I had great teachers. But I can tell you that in my community, there was really no place to go, but we had a level of creativity. There was a landfill that's located right on Reed Road that we would ride our bikes down. We didn't know it was, contaminated. We just had fun, But if you ask my mom, on the other hand, where do I go get a good loaf of bread? We have to drive across town.
Get a food desert.
It's food desert. But the idea is that comfort is the enemy for change. And that when the community, I was so proud when I drove through down Belfort, or Scott, I'm sorry, and I saw the sign in the Esplanade that said, Historic Community Sunnyside. But as soon as I saw that sign, I ran over a huge pothole, and I couldn't stop at the corner store because the corner store is kind of filled with people that you may not want to, do business with, and you got to drive all the way out to 288 in Pearland to go get a nice meal or nice groceries, right? So the idea is it's kind of the paradox of change. We can implement those small pieces, but if we don't look at it systemically, then we're always kind of biting the bullet.
I'm going to ask Noel one question. I haven't forgotten about you, but part of, you said the word historic, and obviously in this country we have historic segregation of schools and of housing. Is all of that still present in Houston in some way?
There is always a tale of two cities. And in fact, had it not been for my transfer out of Sunnyside into the Stellar Link community, I would have never knew that tale to be true. Mm-hmm. Because when I was bused from Sunnyside and I rode down Stellar Link and I went to Persian Middle School, I saw a whole different perspective of what life was. So is it intentional? I don't know, but if you look at Sunnyside today, you see the old pier and beam homes, the wood homes now being demolished and erecting are the new kind of slab homes on concrete slabs and things of that nature. But what has happened is the mentality of the people haven't changed. I can revitalize the community, but if I don't revitalize the heart, then it doesn't change the community the way it should. I look at the corner of Scott and OST. I used to work at the Rice supermarket right there at one point. And they literally used to beat up the shoplifters and then take a Polaroid, everybody know what a Polaroid is, right? And stick the Polaroid by the customer service booth. And they asked me one time as a high school student to go chase a shoplifter. What do you want me to do? I did what I was told. The lady had already began eating the food. So I came back and said, hey, she got it. I'm gone. But my point is that they demolished the Rice store. They erected an H-E-B here, everything's better. And the economy and that entire corridor changed. It's called a supermarket theory. So the idea is that we can look at these small kind of pockets of opportunities, but if we don't look at them systematically and address the root cause, don't buy me a new car, teach me how to drive. Mm-hmm. And if you teach me how to drive, my paradigm shift, whether I got a new car or old car, is that I'm going to be a safe driver, not only for myself, but those around us.
So Elvin, we've been talking, we're the olds, we know what Polaroids are. What is it you think that legislators and folks, even with the best intentions, don't necessarily understand about the struggles of young people of color in this city?
What I feel like they don't understand is the way that we grew up. Everyone grows up different. Nobody grows up the same. We might grow up in the same environment, but we're two different people. I feel, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just not the same. I know for a fact that I could go out to Rice University and hang out with someone my age, but we're not the same people. He might tell me something that he's been through, and I can tell them that something that I've been through, and it's just not the same connect. But I always like to learn from people, and I always like to give my story and tell them where I grew up from and how I came up. Because in my neighborhood, it might be a sunny day, but it doesn't look sunny to me. It looks gloomy. So I like coming out to downtown, and I like just moving around. So like when I grow up, I know for a fact I want to open up my own eye clinic back in Sunnyside and give back to the community.
You want to come home?
Yeah, I want to come back home and give back to the community.
Yeah, one of the big issues in the criminal justice system, I'm not telling any folks anything you don't know, is the idea that kids who are in the system sometimes get put back in the system because, not necessarily because they broke a law, but because they broke a rule, something to do with their probation. If there was something you could fix in that system, what would it be?
The point of entry, right? As a former school teacher, I think I sent about one child to the principal's office because we worked out those issues in the classroom. We addressed them collectively, and I did not make a mockery of the escalation and referral process. The point of entry for many of our youth in the criminal justice system does not start in the community, it starts in our classrooms.
In schools, right.
Right? And much like police officers, teachers, and all professionals, the largest amount of strength comes from the amount of their discretion. You know, so if you got a teacher that is really putting a child and labeling a child, and whether through implicit bias or explicit bias, is railroading this child because they don't believe, because I've always believed that I'm not what I think I am not what you think I am what I think you think I am. Then my behavior is influenced by the way I think you perceive me. I had a young man who walked in my classroom every day. He was the classroom bully at Fondren Middle School. He was drunk and he was high in the 7th grade. All the teachers wanted to refer him to my class because when he came in, there was a sense of hope. Remember, we can't live a second without hope. And I told him, I said, you're a bully, huh? I said, great leadership skills. Let us find another way to put them to use. And I put him in charge of my class. And every time he came to my class, I was a science teacher, so I did all the fun stuff. He did it. His breath smelled like spearmint and peppermint, and his eyes became wider. He eventually moved on and got promoted and graduated. It was just that one level of support. So if you're talking about the criminal justice system, I don't want to look at the back end, I look at the front end. Because as soon as you send that child to the principal's office, or as soon as that Houston ISD police officer engaged them with silver handcuffs that don't separate, then we've just created a pro-trauma stress situation. Give it that. Yeah, you can get that. That's good. Because let me tell you something. Let me level the playing field. The people who are in our justice system are just like us, but we just have not got caught yet. Because you cannot say what it feels like until you feel it on your own arms. And you put on that orange suit and it feels tough on the body of your skin. You may hear what I'm saying right now, but I need you to pay attention to the message. The point of entry is where we find the degradation of our systems. The discretion that police officers have are paramount to this process. And I can tell you one thing, everybody knows in this room, when you are on that car on any street and you see those disco lights in behind you, you ain't celebrating. There's a level of trepidation that goes through that body that's unlike any other movie or horror film that you see. Your body clench and the anxiety and your endorphins flow and you're like, what did I do wrong? You can be a judge, you can be a principal, or you can be Elvin Quioto who drove in Prairie at 1:30 in the morning and got cited for doing 76 because the 75 marker would have gave him a $100 ticket instead of a 76 that gave him a $300 ticket, who had to spend his scholarship money to recompense and pay tithe to Waller County. So what I'm saying, Alison, is that if we want to address the problem, we can go through the whole situation and begin to evaluate and dissect and bring together what we need to do post-entry. Because I look at the justice system in 4 lenses: prevention, intervention, enforcement, and reentry recovery. But if we put our energy on prevention and intervention, then the enforcement and recovery will be something different. In the state of Texas, on March the 29th, 2017, Senate Bill 30 was passed that will require every high school student seeking to graduate and every person in the state of Texas seeking a driver's license and every police officer governed under the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement to receive at least 1 hour of instruction on how to talk to one another. Now, you might say, what is that and how is that a big deal? Well, I can tell you what, we haven't got that right in our marriages, have we? Talking together.
No, that's a huge deal.
That's a huge deal.
Communication is a huge deal.
Communication is the thread to everything happening.
I want to get some mics out here because I knew we were going to have some questions.
Okay, so let me wrap up real quick. So the idea is that if we inform and educate, level the playing field, then obviously we can have an opportunity we can live in harmony to some extent.
We've got time for one question, one or two. Anybody? Right over here? This.
I think I have more than just I have a statement.
Okay.
Sitting here, I'm with Wyndham School District out of Huntsville, and sitting here is kind of a out-of-body experience for me.
Wow.
Because at 18 years old, I'm 50 years old now, and I think I look pretty good for 50. But at
you know what a Polaroid is.
At 18 years old, I was that one when I was going to sit here and just be quiet and just listen. But when you said something about those orange jumpsuits and those handcuffs that don't separate and all that kind of stuff, I'm from Beaumont, but I moved to Houston when I was 18 years old in 1986. And just that kid, Sunnyside, just kind of hanging around and just kind of milling around, even though I had a scholarship to U of H, I was still that young black kid, just flowing, just rolling around, and got caught up on Hiram Clark and wind up going into Harris County and doing about 3 months, and then this is where it comes, this is my thing, my statement. Education should be about the transformation of self and society. So if we're going to work with our young black boys, our young brown people, I hate the word minority, I hate the word African American, I'm an American, I just happen to be black. So I was born here and that's the way it is, okay? Right. So if we're going to change it where these young brothers and sisters are no longer becoming parts of this systematic white privilege that we see all the time and the systematic racism, then we've got to inform them from the womb. I have 2 boys who are clean and upright and strong, and I have a daughter who's now going to Sam Houston for music therapy. And the reason that they are the way that they are is because, number one, me and Mom have been married 30 years, and secondly, we began to educate them from the womb.
That's right.
So if we're going to change this thing, then we have to do what? Educate them. Educate them in the school, educate them in the home, educate them so that when they go out and meet a police officer,
that's right,
they will know their own rights instead of having to be all polite because they don't know what this Mr. Policeman or policewoman is going to do to them. So my only statement is education. Continue doing, I was going to be cool and just sit down.
No,
that's all right.
Good
education.
Got a conversation.
Education. Education. Thank you.
You know, Barbara, thank you. You look like you're about 30.
Thank you.
Barbara Jordan said that education has always been the key to both economic and political empowerment. And you're so right. And with My Brother's Keeper, President Barack Obama in 2014 launched the My Brother's Keeper Challenge, and Houston is like one of 250 in all 50 states and DC and Puerto Rico that accepted the challenge. And Elvin was a product of the MBK internship. But he says this, that there are 6 pillars that can help combat community eruption. 1 is entering school ready to learn. 2 is reading on grade level by the 3rd grade. 3, graduating high school prepared for college and or career, because a diploma is not a celebratory moment anymore. All right? 4 is completing post-secondary education or training. 5 is successfully entering the workforce. And 6 is when you find a brother walking down Hiram Clark and got caught up, is to provide them a second chance opportunity so they can get back on track. And that's the continuum that we're working in with the city of Houston. So though there are problems, there are also solutions. And one of those things that we have to keep in mind is that we can't boil the ocean. If we did, we have a great fish fry, but we can't boil it. So we have to be methodical, systematic about our approach to address that in education, health, employment, and the justice, all the systems that make that happen.
Please join me in thanking Noel and wishing Elvin all the best next year.
All right.